Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to another edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. All right, if this was a Monday, I would call it another miserable Monday. Watching the New York Giants lose another football game, but I guess we'll call it a terrible Tuesday after the Giants lost on Monday night to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we're going to break it all down here for you. So drop your comments, drop your questions into the chat here as we're live. So we'll see what we can get to, and as always, the day after games, I'm here with Big Blue Views Tony DelGenio. Tony, good morning, and I hope you got at least a tiny bit more sleep than I did.
Yeah, I got a reasonable amount of sleep. Not very restful sleep after that game, but
well, between that and the Yankees, since I'm a Yankee fan, not a whole lot to feel good about. No sweet dreams last night.
no, the Yankees didn't play last night.
Not the real Yankees.
No, the Dodgers did, but the Yankees didn't.
This is true. This is very true. I don't think the Yankees have played yet in the World Series. But anyway, let's talk New York Giants, and this, going into the game, none of us picked the Giants to win. But this was yet another game where the Giants found a way to be in it. They found a way to be in it. They just weren't good enough to win it. And that has by and large been the story of the season. And we'll get into Daniel Jones a little bit later. It's also the story of Daniel Jones. A lot of good, but not enough good to win. But just before we get into Deonte Banks specifically and Daniel Jones specifically and the rest of it, just your generic thoughts on the game last night.
Yeah, I think you summed it up nicely. It's amazing, but the Giants could easily be 6-2 this season, and if we all knew going into the season that the first half of the schedule it looked like it would be the toughest. And in fact, right now, if you look at the teams the Giants have lost to, they've lost to 4 teams that are either 6-2 or 5-2 and would be in the playoffs if they started today. So they're losing to teams that by NFL standards are considered good teams, and hanging in there in most of the games. Okay, throw out the Minnesota game the first week in the season, and Minnesota confused everyone for the first 5 weeks of the season until people started to figure out the defense that Brian Flores was running. But for the most part, the Giants have played well against teams that are beating up on other teams in the league right now. And Pittsburgh is one of those teams. Pittsburgh's now 6-2, and so they're not a bad team that is getting blown out of games. They're a team that really has the potential to be good, but they, number one, make mistakes all over the place that prevent them from scoring the points they should, and number two, they don't find ways to come up with the big play at the big time. And I think it looks like a lack of discipline, but it also looks like shortcomings at certain positions. And at this point, I think it's pretty obvious that quarterback is one of those positions.
Right, and we'll get into Daniel Jones here in a little bit, Tony. But I think we have to start with the benching of Deonte Banks before halftime on Monday night, and I have tried to defend Banks. I said the other day that I think he's a good kid who sometimes lets his emotions, lets his disappointment get the better of him. And yet last night, the Giants pulled him out of the game when it was still 6-6, 9-6. It was still a close It was a close game in the first half. It wasn't a blowout. And I think you and I have to be honest with the viewers here. We weren't at the game. ESPN did a terrible job of even discussing anything about Tay Banks. They didn't even really talk about Banks being benched until the middle of the third quarter. It's been a little bit vague in terms of, Brian Daboll's response and everything in terms of exactly why Banks got benched, whether it was one specific play. They insist it was not the play where Najee Harris hurdled him. There's some discussion that it was the George Pickens non-touchdown where Banks knocked him out of bounds. Some discussion that maybe it was his lack of effort in allowing Pickens to be open in the first place. But I haven't had a chance to review the game and look at any clips from it and see that series myself. But it's just plain disturbing that after last week, and it's what I kind of feared. There were no consequences in terms of playing time for last week. And here the Giants were this week having to address what they saw, what they felt was lack of effort or lack of fundamentals or whatever it was with Tay Banks and yanking him out of the game.
Yeah, I kind of understand not benching him last week. I mean, Dable had for all of Dable's outbursts on the sideline when you see him getting all red in the face, yelling and screaming at someone who's messed up on the field. For all of that, his reputation is being a player's coach, and not someone who's overly hard on the players. So I was kind of okay with the idea of him not sitting Tay Banks down last week, but so I was fine that he did it this week if he saw something that he didn't like on the Pickens almost touchdown play, the 2 feet in but not both feet in play.
Weirdest thing ever.
So
get 1 foot down twice, but never get the other foot down at all. Weirdest thing I ever saw.
Right? Really, yeah, and you can understand that they don't have that specifically in the rule book.
You got 2 feet in; it was just the same foot both times. All right, then.
Anyway, but I think what you see on the repeat play of that play, which is something that has driven me crazy about Banks ever since he's become a Giant, is that he doesn't get his hands up to actually try to defend the ball. A lot of the time he's close to the receiver that he's supposed to be defending, but he's not going up and contesting the ball and trying to make it difficult for the receiver to catch the ball or difficult for the receiver to hold on to the ball after he catches it. And that was another one of those plays. He was like right there, and he was watching Pickens catch the ball. And the Giants had another defender in the vicinity who actually tried to go up and dislodge the ball from Pickens' hands. I forget who that was.
That was Pinnock. Pinnock took a swipe at it and missed.
That's right. Yes. Mm-hmm. But at least he tried. And
yes.
That's what you see with Banks, is that he's not doing the basic thing that a defensive back is supposed to do, and that is contest the catch.
Yeah, and that's it. I don't know if it's a lack of instincts, a lack of awareness, but I'm going to be interested in what Brian Daboll says about Banks a little bit later on today when I get on his day after game Zoom call, and I'm going to be interested to see if Banks starts on Sunday against the Commanders. It's just disappointing that we're here after all of the hullabaloo from a week ago, from the Jalen Hurts play. And this is a first round draft pick that the Giants have a lot invested in, and they need him to be a player, and they know he can be a player, but you can't we talked last week about spinning your wheels, and you continue to spin your wheels as an organization when you have first round picks that don't give you first round play. and I think everybody, most people liked the Banks pick, liked all of that. And I went back and I looked, Tony. I went back and I looked at scouting reports, and I went back and I talked to some people I know who watched him play in college, and there were no indications of lack of effort. There were no indications of attitude. There, of problems along that line. So there were concerns about his ball skills. There were concerns. Basically, his NFL comp was Adoree Jackson, who, when Adoree Jackson was at his best, was a good cover corner, but not a difference maker because he had no ball skills. He didn't make interceptions. He didn't make game-changing plays. But there were never questions about this kid's attitude or work ethic. So it's disappointing and it's kind of mystifying.
Yeah, and I think I see a comment from Chris PH asking, weren't they concerned about his low INTs? And I think that was the case, that he didn't have a reputation as a ball hawk in college. But the other thing to remember about, or a couple of other things to remember about that particular draft, is that there was a run on cornerbacks moving towards where the Giants were picking, and the Giants were down around whatever it was, 25th or something like that in round one. And so they watched a lot of defensive backs go off the board. They, I think, considered themselves lucky that Washington went for Emmanuel Forbes, who has done nothing for
Right.
them in round one, with a number of something like 16 pick or something like that, and that Banks was there. But as you said, Banks had a very good reputation in college, not as a ball hawk, but as a defender against passes who could keep up with the elite receivers, and that's the thing you're looking for in your number one cornerback. You're looking for a guy who can keep up with some of the most impressively athletic people on a football field, and I would argue that he's kind of shown that, and on the touchdown to Pickens, he was right there in the end zone, right, with him. It's not like he was badly beat or anything like that. It's just that he doesn't go up. And again, I mean,
And play the football. Don't go. He didn't go play the football.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I mean, I'd rather have the interceptions, but I'll be happy with defense to passes. And because that's the number one thing a cornerback has to do. And so that's the part that is driving me crazy about him, is I just don't see him go up to contest the pass.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Banks going forward. Tony, let's talk about Daniel Jones. All right, let's turn to the Jones discussion before we get any farther in the show here. And Chris PH again asks another question here, and thank you for listening, Chris, and for participating. He says, when do you think Jones will throw his next touchdown pass? And not to be snotty, but how about the next time he actually throws a touchdown pass where the Giants don't commit a penalty that nullifies it? Because that's been the case 2 weeks in a row. So how about when the Giants don't shoot themselves in the foot by committing a penalty? But let's talk about Jones, Tony, and before I go on and on here, I gave him a Quilly last night. I will defend that here in a minute. But I want your thoughts, before I speechify on Jones here. I want your thoughts on Jones from last night.
So I agreed with your assessment of a Quilly, that is some good and some bad last night. Overall, he did not have a bad game last night. He threw for 264 yards. People have been screaming for him to take shots downfield, and he did last night. He had a really nice completion to Darius Slayton early in the game, and then another long one, I think, later in the game. And so he was trying to get the ball downfield last night, and he was having some success doing it. The flip side of Daniel Jones is that he he's just not that accurate a passer, and it's not just passes that are overthrown and can't be completed, or underthrown and can't be completed. It's the passes that he throws that are completed but are not placed accurately enough for the receiver to catch the ball and then keep on running and gain a lot of yards after the catch. He's not very good at what Matt Waldman calls pinpoint accuracy on his passes, and so he can have sort of good looking stats. And in last night, 264 yards passing, it was something like, I can't remember whether it was 19 for 30 or something like that. So the stats looked okay, and he did have that one touchdown taken off the board by the penalty. But you look up in the end, and the Giants are putting up 10 points a game, 15 points a game, and they struggle to get to 20 points a game. And I think it's the fact that you never see the Giants putting up 25, 30 points a game that kind of points to some of the things that he doesn't do that will drive you crazy about him. And that's, I guess that is just a physical talent. The other thing, which is a mental thing, is the anticipation. And so one thing that got a lot of play on the broadcast last night was the pass he tried to put in the hole to Darius Slayton on third down the sideline last night, whereas Troy Aikman indicated he waited an extra second to throw the ball before he was sure that Slayton was past the first defender before he put the ball in there. And that's the thing that he really has a problem with, is getting rid of the ball before the receiver obviously has beaten the defender. And so when you can't make those plays, you can kind of look okay out there, but you look up at the end of the night and there aren't many points on the board.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I want to give credit where credit's due, because I generally do not like listening to Troy Aikman on broadcasts. But when it comes to accurately assessing what Daniel Jones is and what Daniel Jones is not, I thought Troy Aikman, and to a lesser extent Joe Buck, but I thought Troy Aikman in particular was very much on point last night in showing the things that Daniel Jones did well, in crediting him when he made a couple of excellent throws to Darius Slayton, in crediting him when he made a beautiful deep throw to Malik Neighbors, who dropped the ball, which, as much as everybody loves Malik Neighbors, that's becoming annoying. That is becoming annoying. The Giants getting the ball into Malik Neighbors' hands with chances to make difference-making plays, and Malik Neighbors not making them, is becoming annoying, because there have been about 4 of those so far this year, at least. And there was another drop last night on a slant, which again was not perfectly thrown, but should have been caught, should have been a first down. If it's perfectly thrown, maybe it's a 20-yard gain, but it turned into nothing. And and that's another topic. But back to Jones, I thought Aikman perfectly described what Daniel Jones is, what Daniel Jones is not. The Slayton play showed the 2 issues with Jones. He didn't throw the ball with anticipation. And then when he did throw it, he didn't throw it accurately. Because if he throws that ball on Slayton's numbers, instead of making Slayton, leap for the ball where he got hit and had the ball jarred loose, if he throws the ball on Slayton's numbers, it's still a catch, and nobody cares that he was a beat late throwing the ball. So, but that's everything. We saw everything Jones is: competitive, resilient. We saw fire from him last night. We saw him take a lot of hits. We saw him stand in the pocket and deliver the football. And yet at the end of the game, when it was time for the quarterback to win the game, we saw what we've seen a lot of times from Daniel Jones. He's just not quite good enough. We saw the mistake, that I was a little bit surprised that Brian Daboll admitted that there was a mistake in the pass protection. I was a little surprised that he admitted that Jones had failed to move Theo Johnson from left to right. Daboll said that they put Johnson on the left. They weren't sure which side TJ Watt was going to line up on, but wherever he was, their intent was to double team him on that play. And while he didn't specifically answer the question in this much detail, he did say Jones got focused on reading the coverage and never called for the shift. I think what he was saying is Jones ran out of time. He ran out of time probably to get Theo Johnson shifted to the other side. A mistake Jones admitted, and then the last drive interception was simply a play where he was on his back foot and he overthrew the ball. And maybe that's a throw he should have been able to make. Or maybe he had time to set his feet. I don't know, but where you're at is pretty much where we've always been at with Jones. Is he showed you everything, and he showed you in the end why he's just not quite good enough, and why the Giants will almost certainly be moving on at the end of this season.
Yeah, and last night, and I don't want to make too much of that final drive last night because, even if he doesn't make those mistakes that you just alluded to late in the game, still they were 8 points down. They
Right.
had a chance to go get a touchdown, but then they would have had to get a 2-point conversion just to tie the game. And so it's not as if that was the difference in them winning and losing the game, but it was obviously their last chance to try to win the game. And I haven't taken the time to go back and just remind myself of his previous record, but I think there are not many examples in his tenure with the Giants of him leading a game-winning drive in the last 2 minutes.
Well, the only time that he ever did that, Tony, really he did. There were I think 4 game-winning drives and 5 fourth quarter comebacks in 2022. Which I think pretty much doubles his career total. So it has only happened in that 2022 season.
But I don't know that he does it like at the very end. So I think he's had fourth quarter comebacks, and I can think of those. I mean, yeah, as you say, in 2022, there was the Green Bay game where he drove them to the winning score in the fourth quarter. The week later in Baltimore, he had actually a short drive, I think, fairly late in the game to get the win for them after the Giants caused Lamar Jackson to fumble. And so there are things like
there are 9 game-winning drives in Jones's career. I'm looking it up on Pro Football Reference, and 5 of those came in 2022.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so for the rest of his career, he had the overtime win against Washington late in his rookie season, where he drove them to the winning score in overtime with a touchdown pass to, I think it was Caden Smith, the Chase Young Bowl, and but there just aren't that many examples, and so he's not the type of quarterback you have confidence in when the Giants are close but not ahead at the end of the game to actually do the job to seal the deal for them. And that's when he seems to make a lot of his mistakes too. And so, I think, the evidence has built up this year, all the things that people like me said he needed. Needed a competent offensive line. He needed better receivers, and he's got that this year. Obviously last night the offensive line did not have a great game, going against a team that has a great pass rush, but they weren't that terrible, last night. And he's got receivers now, and you mentioned Darius Slayton. Every just seems like every week I hear and see online all the talk about trading Darius Slayton at the trading deadline and stuff like that. And when I look at Darius Slayton, I say, why would you want to get rid of this guy? Yeah, I don't know. He's a very good NFL wide receiver, and for a team that needs offense, I'm not sure that picking up whatever a fifth round pick or a sixth round pick, to get rid of Darius Slayton. I'm not sure that would be a wise thing to do. But anyway, the fact is the Giants have the pieces in place now to have a competent offense, yet they don't yet have a competent offense.
Absolutely. Tony, since you mentioned Slayton and the trade deadline, I wasn't going to go here at this point, but I wrote about the trade deadline on Monday at Big Blue View, and I think what I'll say quickly about the trade deadline in reference to both Darius Slayton and Azeez Ojulari is, look, I don't think the Giants are blind. I think they understand that both guys are good players. All right. I think they understand that both guys can help them not only this year or are helping them this year, but could help them into the future. I think the issue is that both players are in the final years of their contracts. And in the case of Ojulari has shown you for the last 3 weeks that as a pure pass rusher, something I've always said is he's probably a better pure pass rusher than Kayvon Thibodeau. But Kayvon Thibodeau is the number 5 overall pick. Brian Burns has a 5-year, $85 million contract or whatever it is. I think it's more than that. I don't have the number in front of me exactly, but Azeez Ojulari, as long as he's with the Giants, is always going to be the third wheel in that group. And I'm pretty certain that there's somebody out there who will have more money to offer Ojulari than the Giants would, and more opportunity. And with Darius Slayton, Darius Slayton had to take a pay cut to stay with the Giants in 2022. Then he had to wait 5 games to actually play because the new regime did not really understand what they had in Darius Slayton. And then he took a 2-year, $12 million contract, which he thought was still an underpay to stay. And I think everybody expects Darius Slayton to go test the open market. And that's the issue. It's not that the Giants wouldn't want to keep Darius Slayton. It's that probably, like with Ojulari, probably Darius Slayton is going to be able to find more money elsewhere. And I think those are the only reasons why you look to perhaps get something for one or both of those guys.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand, why you would try to do it. I just worry about the effect on the Giants if either of them leave. And the Giants pass rush is in pretty good shape with Ojulari there. I mean, I see Ojulari as sort of like he's like kind of like a Bryce Huff type of player, sort of a one-trick pony, right? That, as you say,
He's a pass rusher.
He's a pass rusher, and he's a good one. I think he's a better pass rusher than Kayvon Thibodeau is at the NFL level, and at least as good maybe as Brian Burns is at the NFL level. It's just that he doesn't play the run well, and so he can't be your starting edge defender. But for someone to come in on passing downs and help you get you out of a third and long situation, I think he's got real value. Edge defenders are so scarce that you're probably right that he's going to get a decent offer from somebody to go. I mean, even Lorenzo Carter got a decent offer from someone to leave the Giants, and he was much less accomplished as a pass rusher than Ojulari is. And so, I won't be surprised if they lose either of them, but I'll be concerned if they do, because they whatever they're going to get in draft picks is unlikely to return as much value in the long run as what they already have. But as
Absolutely.
It's a money situation.
Yeah, absolutely understood. It's just a matter of them knowing that they probably have a better feel for whether either of those guys has intentions or desires to come back than
Yeah.
we do. And I think that plays into it. Tony, you mentioned it earlier in the show when we were talking about Daniel Jones. The last two drives, the mistakes that Jones made, at best, really, both of those mistakes, at best, even if they hadn't been made, would have put the Giants in position to potentially get a touchdown and potentially get a 2-point conversion to tie the game, which leads me to maybe being the old, crotchety, get off your lawn sort of traditionalist. But I'm sorry. Analytics are what analytics are, but I do not understand. You're down 23-9. You get a touchdown on a 45-yard run by Tyrone Tracy, which, by the way, as a sidebar, that 45-yard run by Tyrone Tracy is, according to Giants PR, the longest run by a New York Giant running back, not since Saquon Barkley, but since Wayne Gallman in 2020, and the longest touchdown run by a Giant since Barkley's 67-yard run in 2019.
Right.
So, whatever. That's the Barkley Tracy was Barkley, that whole discussion. But I just thought I would point that out. I noted that this morning that's a longer run than Saquon Barkley had for the Giants in 4 years.
That's interesting. I
So
think I remember that Wayne Gallman run. Was that the one in Seattle?
I think so.
When
I'd
they
have
upset
to go
the
back and look,
Seahawks
but
the pandemic year. Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
think I think I remember that run. That's really interesting. I didn't know that Barkley did not have that. I guess I always think of that tremendous play Barkley made in his rookie year at MetLife versus the Eagles when they were on Monday Night Football or whatever. But I guess
Right.
that was a screen pass that he took and made like half the Eagles team miss
Right.
before he was
So
finally brought down.
so
But
for whatever reason, Saquon wasn't giving the Giants those 55-yard runs he
that's
had
right.
against them the other day.
Yeah, yeah.
But
But to get to your, to
to
your
get back to
initial
the point, yes,
point, I thought it was too early to be going for a 2-point conversion, and I'm not against the idea of going, of going for the 2-point conversion, based on what analytics say. So I kind of get the idea of doing that. I just thought it was a little early to be making that decision at the time they made it. And I guess the other thing that I would say about the Giants and 2-point conversions is what the heck was that play that they tried to run for a
yeah,
2-point conversion? And I was surprised, like, not to hear any more illumination of what went on that play after the game with the reporters. I didn't see anyone asking Dable about that. Maybe I just missed it, but whose fault was that? Dable was fuming. Daniel Jones was fuming. The four guys on the side who were supposed to be blocking were just looking up saying, "Hey, what the heck's going on?" And like, how can four guys make a mistake at once? And so I never heard any explanation of why that play blew up so badly.
yeah, there was some explanation. I'll get to it in a second, but my final point about that whole 2-point conversion, about even making that decision, is it's fantastic if it works. But the problem when it doesn't work, and yes, they say, it's a 50-50 shot on 2-point conversions and all of that. The problem when you don't make it, first of all, I hate chasing points when you don't need to chase points. All right. And You kick the extra point, you're down by 7. You're in perfect position. If you happen to get another touchdown, then you can make a choice. Do we kick the extra point, try to play for overtime? Do we go for 2, try to win the game? The problem with not making it is now you're down by 8 and you put yourself in a no choice desperation situation. That's the problem that I had with it. As for the play, I should have known as soon as I saw the Giants do something unique, something interesting, something where I looked at the formation and I was like, what the heck is that? I should have known, because the first thing that crossed my mind was Indianapolis Colts punt. From a few years ago, when they did that disastrous quarterback sneak on a punt where there were more defenders lined up in front of the center than there were blockers, obviously. But Dable said that the explanation, as far as I understand it, is they had the look that they wanted. They had more blockers out there on the sideline than they had defenders out there. So they had the Steelers outnumbered. And I think the problem came in was Daniel Jones saw the Steelers kind of scrambling around. He saw the look. He tried to get the ball snapped quickly. And I think the blockers out there didn't recognize the snap. I think it was Alex Highsmith for Pittsburgh recognized the snap. So the blockers weren't expecting the ball to be snapped quite as quickly. So the play blew up. And Daboll didn't necessarily fault Jones. He didn't necessarily fault the blockers. He just said that from his perspective, the ball was snapped more quickly maybe than the blockers had anticipated. So, but it blew up, and obviously Daboll wasn't happy. Jones wasn't happy. Nobody was happy. Maybe next time, just throw a fade. I don't know. But it was an interesting effort, but I think we all should have known that when the Giants tried to do something unique, that it would blow up.
Yeah, that was a terrible looking play. And just, I mean, your explanation though, then it makes me wonder, well, you practice these things, but then you get into an actual game situation, and are they practicing what might happen in an actual game situation? It's one thing to go out on a field and do it when everybody's all in sync, but if what you say is true, and Jones was changing the snap, then are they practicing that situation? And it still leaves me wondering, well, why was everybody else unaware that that's what was happening? And so it's like you can practice the basic play, but it seems like maybe if you're not making contingency plans and practicing those contingency plans, then it doesn't do much good to practice the actual play. But for whatever reason, I think everyone looked at that play and just rolled their eyes, and it seemed like such a Giants thing to happen.
Absolutely. It's it is definitely a Giants thing to happen, but too many Giants things have happened this year, Tony, and now the Giants are 2-6 for, as NJ Advanced Media pointed out last night, they're a 2-win or less team after 8 games for the 7th time in 8 years now. And it's frustrating as a Giants fan. I know it's aggravating. It's annoying. It feels like the Giants are spinning their wheels. Dexter Lawrence doesn't understand it, because Dexter Lawrence has insisted for weeks now. And if you go player by player through the roster, you can make a case that he's right. But Dexter Lawrence has insisted for weeks now that this is a better football team than the Giants had in 2022. It's just not winning games. And I think every game has its own story. Every game is unique. Every game has its own reasons, but the Giants just haven't been good enough to make the plays they needed to make at the end of games to win them.
Right. And again, you think about it week by week. They should have won the Washington game. They should have won the Dallas game. They should have won the Cincinnati game. And I won't say that they should have won last night, but they could have won last night. Really, the Minnesota game and the Philadelphia game are sort of the only losses where I felt like they were outclassed. And even the Philadelphia game, frankly, I think if they had shown some competence on offense in the first half, they had a chance to win that game too. That game just kind of got away in the second half when it was demonstrated that they could not run their offense and complete passes against Philadelphia. So I don't think they have been totally outplayed except in the Minnesota game at the start of the season. And again, they played mostly good teams. And so I get it when Dexter Lawrence is frustrated, not just at the losing, but because he thinks that they have a good team. Because in some respects, they do have a good team. They just make too many mistakes every week and rarely make the big play when they need to make the big play. And that's really what's missing, whether it's on offense or defense. Right? On offense, they were never getting the big drive you needed in the fourth quarter. And on defense, you're never taking the ball away from the opponent.
Right. I don't think there's a defensive back on the roster, cornerback or safety, that has an interception yet this year.
No,
and
right. Darius Muasau in week 1, who intercepted that tipped pass by Darnold.
That's the only interception of the year. I think, doesn't Okereke have one as well?
I don't
or
think
Okereke
so.
has a couple of fumble recoveries.
I was going to say he had one last night, and that was, I thought, one of the bright spots last night. I thought he played really well. He had a ton of tackles. He had the fumble forced and recovered, and so I've been a little worried about him because he's been sort of invisible this year, and I wondered whether Shane Bowen's defense just doesn't suit him as well as Wink Martindale's defense did, or whether it just takes time for him to adjust to it. But I thought last night he played really well, and I thought that was one good sign.
Absolutely. Anyway, Tony, I think that's probably a good place for us to wrap it up. We will turn our attention as quickly as possible to week 9 against the Commanders at MetLife Stadium. Jaden Hail Mary Daniels and the Commanders coming into town. So we'll give you guys all the coverage you need of that. So stay tuned here on the podcast and at bigblueview.com as well. So Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.